Most people don't notice when they start becoming weaker. It doesn't arrive as a collapse. It arrives as small permissions. Small delays. Small excuses that feel reasonable in the moment. You wake up one day and realize your mind reacts faster than it thinks. Your emotions decide before your values speak. Your attention fractures easily. Your resilience feels thinner than it used to be. This is not because you lack intelligence or potential. It's because your inner world has been shaped quietly, over time, by forces that do not care about your strength. Stoicism was never designed to comfort people living in ease. It was designed to harden the mind against pressure, uncertainty, and loss. It does not soothe weakness. It corrects it. These 8 brutal Stoic lessons are not inspirational ideas. They are corrective forces. They strip away illusion. They remove dependency on comfort. They force you to take responsibility for the only thing that truly belongs to you, how you govern your mind. Stay with this. Not passively. Deliberately. Because the strength Stoicism offers is not loud. It is quiet. And it lasts. Let's begin. The first lesson is uncomfortable because it dismantles a belief modern life depends on. Strength is not built by avoiding discomfort. It is built by moving toward it with clarity. Most people treat discomfort as a signal to stop. Stoicism treats it as a signal to pay attention. The modern mind has been conditioned to interpret discomfort as danger. As something wrong. As evidence that something should be changed immediately. This conditioning weakens the nervous system. It narrows tolerance. It trains avoidance. Stoicism reverses this training. The Stoics understood that the mind grows stronger only when it is required to remain steady under pressure. Without pressure, the mind becomes soft. Without resistance, discipline decays. Without challenge, judgment deteriorates. Discomfort exposes weakness, but it also reveals where strength must be built. This is why Stoicism does not ask whether something feels comfortable. It asks whether something is necessary. When discomfort appears, most people immediately label it as suffering. This is a mistake. Discomfort is information. It reveals where attachment exists. It shows where dependency has formed. It highlights areas where the mind has been trained for ease instead of endurance. Stoicism does not teach you to chase pain. It teaches you to stop fleeing it. There is a critical distinction here. Suffering is unexamined resistance. Discomfort is disciplined exposure. When you remain present with discomfort without emotional dramatization, something changes internally. The mind stops panicking. The nervous system stabilizes. You begin to see that discomfort does not destroy you. It sharpens you. This lesson matters because the world will not reduce pressure to protect your comfort. Expecting that is weakness disguised as hope. Pressure will come through uncertainty. Through responsibility. Through loss. Through demands that arrive without warning. If the mind has only practiced ease, it will break under weight. If the mind has practiced steadiness, it adapts. Stoicism trains adaptation. The perspective shift here is simple but demanding. Stop asking how to remove discomfort. Start asking how to remain stable within it. This is where inner discipline begins. You are not responsible for preventing discomfort. You are responsible for governing your response to it. When you stop treating discomfort as an enemy, it loses its power to destabilize you. It becomes part of the training environment rather than a threat to your identity. The closing truth of this lesson is direct. Discomfort is not punishment. It is preparation. The second lesson deepens this discipline by targeting where most people lose control without realizing it. Your emotions are not commands. They are signals. Modern thinking encourages emotional immediacy. If you feel something strongly, you are encouraged to act on it quickly. To express it fully. To justify it automatically. Stoicism rejects this impulse. The Stoics observed that emotions arise before judgment is complete. They understood that feelings appear faster than wisdom. If allowed to rule unchecked, emotions pull the mind into reaction rather than direction. This does not mean emotions are wrong. It means they are incomplete. An emotion is a partial perception, not a verdict. It contains information, but not instruction. Most people never create distance between feeling and action. This is where strength collapses. The moment emotion becomes authority, self-mastery disappears. Stoicism introduces a critical pause. Not suppression. Not denial. Interruption. Between stimulus and response exists a narrow space. That space determines whether you live reactively or deliberately. When that space is ignored, emotions drive behavior. When that space is trained, reason governs emotion. This lesson matters because emotional reaction creates unnecessary damage. It distorts judgment. It narrows perception. It escalates conflict internally before it ever becomes visible externally. Stoicism does not demand emotional numbness. It demands emotional literacy. To master emotion, you must first stop identifying with it. You must stop saying, "This is who I am," and start saying, "This is what is passing through me." This shift is subtle but powerful. Emotion becomes an object of observation rather than a driver of action. You feel it fully without surrendering control to it. The mind learns restraint. Not rigidity. Restraint. Restraint is strength under pressure. The Stoics warned that unchecked emotion enslaves the mind. Anger narrows thought. Fear distorts risk. Desire clouds judgment. Pride resists correction. These emotions are not dangerous because they exist. They are dangerous because they command behavior without permission. Stoicism restores permission to reason. The perspective shift required here is discipline over impulse. Not emotional suppression. Emotional governance. When emotion rises, the Stoic response is internal questioning rather than external reaction. Is this perception complete? Is this response necessary? Is this aligned with who I choose to be? This process interrupts automatic behavior. It slows the internal environment. It returns authority to the rational mind. This is not easy. It is practiced. Each moment you refuse to act immediately on emotion, you reinforce inner authority. Each pause strengthens judgment. Each restraint builds stability. Over time, emotions lose their ability to hijack behavior. They still arise. They simply no longer rule. The closing truth of this lesson is foundational. You do not eliminate emotion to become strong. You discipline it. The third lesson dismantles one of the most damaging expectations the mind quietly carries. Life is not obligated to be fair. And strength begins the moment you stop demanding that it be. Most people suffer not because something went wrong, but because reality failed to meet an expectation they never questioned. They expect effort to guarantee reward. They expect intention to guarantee outcome. They expect decency to be returned in equal measure. When those expectations are violated, resentment forms. Not because harm occurred, but because a mental contract was imagined and then broken. Stoicism begins where this illusion ends. The Stoics did not believe the world was unjust. They believed the world was indifferent. It does not organize itself around personal narratives. It does not operate according to moral symmetry. It unfolds according to causes, chance, and human imperfection. This lesson matters because the expectation of fairness creates fragility. When the mind believes it is owed a particular outcome, it becomes brittle. It resists reality instead of adapting to it. Resistance drains strength. Acceptance conserves it. Acceptance, in Stoic terms, does not mean approval. It means clarity. When you accept that fairness is not guaranteed, you stop personalizing outcomes. You stop interpreting adversity as injustice. You stop wasting energy arguing with what already exists. The Stoic response to unfairness is not complaint. It is recalibration. What remains within your authority does not change simply because life behaves unpredictably. Your judgment. Your conduct. Your response. This perspective shift is severe but stabilizing. Instead of asking why this should not be happening, the Stoic asks what is now required. This question restores agency. Unfairness no longer becomes a threat to identity. It becomes a condition to navigate. The emotional consequence of this shift is significant. Bitterness dissolves. Entitlement disappears. Victimhood loses its grip. The mind becomes resilient not because the world becomes kinder, but because expectations become realistic. Stoicism teaches that demanding fairness from an uncontrollable world is a form of self-inflicted frustration. Letting go of that demand does not make you passive. It makes you precise. You stop fighting reality. You start directing yourself. The closing truth of this lesson is steady and unromantic. The world does not owe you fairness. You owe yourself strength. The fourth lesson sharpens this discipline by narrowing the focus of power. You are not weakened by what you cannot control. You are weakened by trying to control it. Most mental exhaustion comes from misplaced effort. Attention scattered toward outcomes, opinions, events, and variables that do not belong to you. Stoicism draws a hard boundary here. Some things are within your control. Most things are not. Clarity begins with distinguishing between the two. When this distinction is ignored, the mind becomes agitated. It reaches outward for authority it does not possess. It attempts to manage uncertainty by force of worry. Worry does not create influence. It creates tension. The Stoics understood that freedom begins when responsibility is correctly assigned. They taught that power exists only where choice exists. Your thoughts. Your values. Your judgments. Your actions. Outside of this domain, there is influence at best, illusion at worst. This lesson matters because control defines stability. When the mind anchors itself to uncontrollable variables, it becomes reactive. When it anchors itself to internal authority, it becomes steady. The shift required here is severe honesty. You must stop pretending you can manage outcomes indirectly through anxiety, rumination, or anticipation. These behaviors feel active but accomplish nothing. Stoicism removes false effort. By withdrawing attention from what cannot be controlled, energy returns to where it can be used. Decision-making sharpens. Focus stabilizes. Inner order emerges. This does not mean detachment from responsibility. It means precision in responsibility. You act fully where action matters. You release completely where it does not. This clarity reduces internal conflict. The mind stops arguing with reality. It begins working with it. The emotional result is calm without passivity. Engagement without agitation. You no longer measure yourself by outcomes. You measure yourself by alignment. This is how Stoicism replaces anxiety with discipline. The closing truth of this lesson is exact. Power lives only where control exists. Now pause here. Up to this point, the lessons have stripped away illusions. About comfort. About emotion. About fairness. About control. What remains is not yet strength. It is exposure. This is the midpoint where the mind either resists or commits. Because once illusion is removed, responsibility becomes unavoidable. There is no external structure left to blame. No expectation left to protect you. No distraction left to hide behind. Only choice. This is where Stoicism becomes heavy. Not intellectually. Existentially. The realization settles slowly. If comfort does not save you, if emotion does not guide you, If fairness is not promised, if control is limited, then the only thing shaping your life is how you meet what arrives. This recognition is not dramatic. It is sobering. It forces the mind inward. It demands ownership. And from this point forward, the lessons no longer remove weakness. They demand construction. What comes next is not about understanding. It is about endurance. The fifth lesson is where Stoicism stops correcting perception and begins forging endurance. Strength does not emerge automatically under pressure. It emerges through deliberate preparation. Most people assume resilience will appear when they need it. They believe endurance is a reaction. Stoicism rejects this assumption. Resilience is trained long before it is tested. The Stoics understood that the mind adapts to the conditions it repeatedly experiences. If it is consistently sheltered, it becomes dependent. If it is consistently challenged, it becomes capable. This lesson matters because untrained minds collapse under weight they were never prepared to carry. Not because the weight is excessive, but because the structure beneath it is undeveloped. Stoicism introduces the concept of voluntary discipline. Not as punishment. Not as deprivation. But as conditioning. Voluntary discipline removes the mind's reliance on comfort. It teaches the nervous system that difficulty is survivable. It recalibrates tolerance. When difficulty is encountered by choice, fear loses its authority. The mind stops interpreting challenge as threat. It begins interpreting it as familiar terrain. This shift is subtle but decisive. A mind that has rehearsed restraint does not panic when restraint is required. A mind that has rehearsed effort does not resist effort when it becomes necessary. This is not about severity. It is about consistency. Stoicism does not glorify suffering. It removes dependency on ease. Dependency creates fragility. Discipline creates independence. The internal change here is profound. Desire loses urgency. Impulse loses force. Discomfort loses drama. The mind becomes less reactive because it no longer treats challenge as exceptional. Challenge becomes part of the environment, not a disruption to it. This lesson demands honesty. If the mind has never practiced discipline, it will seek comfort under pressure. That seeking weakens judgment at precisely the moment clarity is required. Stoicism prepares the mind to remain functional when ease disappears. The perspective shift is direct. Do not wait for hardship to train you. Train before hardship arrives. This is not pessimism. It is realism. The closing truth of this lesson is uncompromising. Untrained strength does not appear when needed. The sixth lesson removes another subtle weakness. That undermines endurance. Attachment to outcome. Most people measure themselves by results. Progress becomes validation. Success becomes identity. Delay becomes failure. Stoicism dismantles this structure. Outcomes are external. They depend on factors beyond judgment and effort. When identity becomes tied to outcome, stability disappears. This lesson matters because attachment to results distorts behavior. It accelerates impatience. It encourages shortcuts. It injects anxiety into effort. Stoicism redirects attention from outcome to alignment. Alignment with values. Alignment with discipline. Alignment with internal standards. When effort becomes the focus, outcome loses its power to destabilize. The mind remains engaged without becoming dependent. This shift restores control. You cannot command results. You can command conduct. Stoicism teaches that when conduct is governed correctly, results follow naturally or become irrelevant. Either outcome preserves stability. This is not indifference. It is precision. The mind stops negotiating with uncertainty. It commits fully to what is within authority. This lesson requires maturity. The desire for recognition, reward, and confirmation must be relinquished. Not because these things are harmful, but because dependency on them is. When discipline becomes identity, motivation becomes unnecessary. Consistency replaces intensity. This is how endurance is sustained over time. The closing truth of this lesson is stabilizing. You control effort. Nothing else. Now notice what has changed. Earlier lessons removed illusions. These lessons build structure. The mind no longer seeks comfort. It no longer obeys emotion. It no longer demands fairness. It no longer chases control where none exists. Instead, it prepares. It disciplines. It aligns. What remains now is the deepest confrontation Stoicism offers. Not with the world. With time. The seventh lesson forces the mind to face its most avoided truth. Your time is finite. Stoicism does not treat this as a threat. It treats it as a clarifier. Most weakness persists because urgency is postponed. Decisions are delayed. Standards are softened. Boundaries are deferred. The illusion of endless time enables mediocrity. Stoicism destroys that illusion. When the mind accepts impermanence, priorities sharpen. Distraction loses appeal. Avoidance loses justification. This lesson matters because time shapes every consequence. What is tolerated now becomes permanent later. What is delayed now accumulates cost. Stoicism does not ask you to fear mortality. It asks you to respect it. Respect transforms behavior. When time is treated as limited, intention becomes precise. Commitment becomes serious. Choice becomes deliberate. This awareness removes procrastination without pressure. It replaces it with clarity. The mind stops asking when it will act. It asks whether it will. This shift is quiet but irreversible. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop postponing responsibility. You stop assuming conditions will improve on their own. The closing truth of this lesson is stark and stabilizing. Time does not wait for readiness. The final lesson will not add intensity. It will remove dependency. Because strength that depends on approval, recognition, or validation cannot survive pressure. The eighth lesson completes the structure Stoicism builds by removing the final dependency most people never question. The need for validation. Approval feels harmless. Often it feels encouraging. But dependence on it quietly erodes inner authority. When validation becomes necessary, behavior shifts. Decisions soften. Standards bend. Truth becomes conditional. Stoicism rejects this dependency completely. The Stoics held virtue as the highest good. Not reputation. Not praise. Not acceptance. Virtue is internal. It does not require witnesses. It does not fluctuate with opinion. It does not weaken under criticism. This lesson matters because validation is unstable by nature. It changes with mood. It disappears under pressure. It vanishes when integrity is most needed. A mind that relies on external approval cannot remain steady. It adjusts itself constantly. It performs rather than decides. It reacts rather than stands. Stoicism restores internal alignment. When actions are guided by principle rather than applause, consistency returns. The mind no longer scans the environment for permission. It answers to its own standards. This is not arrogance. It is self-respect. Living by virtue requires clarity. You must define what matters before pressure arrives. Otherwise pressure defines it for you. The Stoics understood that character is revealed when conformity would be easier. When silence would be safer. When compromise would be rewarded. Virtue holds the line. This lesson demands courage. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet kind that acts correctly without reinforcement. When validation is removed from the equation, something stabilizes. Energy stops leaking outward. Attention returns inward. Identity solidifies. You no longer need to be seen as strong. You simply act with strength. You no longer need to be admired. You become reliable. This is the final discipline because it seals the structure. A mind governed by virtue cannot be destabilized by opinion. It does not collapse when praise disappears. It does not inflate when recognition arrives. It remains itself. The closing truth of this lesson is foundational. What you stand for matters more than how you are seen. Now step back and observe what these 8 lessons have done. They removed comfort as a guide. They disciplined emotion. They dissolved the illusion of fairness. They clarified control. They trained endurance. They detached identity from outcome. They sharpened urgency through awareness of time. They anchored behavior in virtue rather than approval. None of these lessons were designed to make life easier. They were designed to make you stronger than circumstances. Stoicism does not promise peace without effort. It promises stability through responsibility. Knowing these principles changes nothing by itself. Strength does not come from understanding. It comes from alignment. You become stronger each time you choose discipline over ease. Each time you pause instead of react. Each time you accept reality without resentment. Each time you focus only where control exists. Each time you prepare instead of wait. Each time you act without needing recognition. This is not a moment. It is a posture. And posture is practiced daily. Before you leave, make a decision. Not a promise to improve someday. A commitment to govern yourself now. Write it clearly. I choose strength over comfort. If this reflection sharpens something in you, acknowledge it. Not for validation. For alignment. And if you want to continue building a mind that remains steady under pressure, stay connected. This is not about motivation. It is about mastery. Your strength is not hidden. It is waiting to be claimed.